Hello, I'm Paul Hosking. This is the third meetup of the Formbird Water Professionals. If you'd like to become a member, make sure you click on the link below. Let's get on with it. This is the third time we've done a water meetup. I don't have a joke for number 3. Number 1s and 2s was good for the water people. That's for you, Adam. I hope you appreciate it. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to do today. Grant is going to tell us a little bit about Dial Before You Dig. There's Grant there with the stripy shirt on, stripy thing there. Hi, Grant. And he's been working on something and would really like people to have their say about how it's going to work and how it's going to look. It may not be relevant to everybody, but it's a very important safety and infrastructure protection system, and it's going to be integrated into Clarity. So it's going to be important. Mark is also going to tell us about the collaboration meetings that he's doing with some smaller councils about setting up an off-the-shelf version of Clarity. And again, it's a great opportunity to have some input, but he's got the meeting planned for next Wednesday, which anyone can be invited to it. There's a great list of people already coming to that, but we just want to perhaps introduce a little bit. Mark, I'll ask you, what is news and what's happening in Saudi Arabia?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so just a quick little, I suppose, corporate update on where we're at. On the business side, we've had an interesting project, which was with Richardo Engineering, which we're actually auditing their rail network, their secondary rail network. So what was happening there was that the primary rail network is about to take over the secondary rail network, and they actually wanted Richardo to go and find a whole heap loaded defects so that they could, reduce the purchase price. So they're actually going off and doing a whole lot of auditing. But what was interesting, they're using the version 4, so the upcoming release that Lachie's been busting his back on. I was going to say something else, but I'll be polite. So version 4 is our new complete Angular release. And also it brings forward our offline capability. But we're really trying to make a real effort and get some users actually using the offline capability and therefore getting it in sort of production ready and what have you. So they use the offline. We also have a project now with that Sean's kicked off with Bundaberg using the offline for meter reading. So he actually wants to use it for meter reading and sort of asset. So he's just gone out, they outsource their meter reading. So they're just going out for tender at the moment, and will include a bit of asset assessment while they're doing the meter reads as well. So, take 2 photos and away you go. So that'll be good, and we hope that then can flow through to general utilisation across many of our apps. We're getting a lot of pressure to introduce it into the fleet app, particularly for things like our daily driver check sheet and what have you, where a lot of our regional councils are quite remote when they're operating their heavy equipment and what have you. Naturally, people like Barwon and probably less Greater Western, but some of those guys could certainly utilise it in terms of it'll also just simply improve performance in particular areas. So that's exciting. The actual Angular release naturally is a lot faster. I hope Lachie can attest to that. The advantage there is that the new sort of architecture that's come along with that Google's implemented in that actually caches a lot more of the application. It actually gets loaded into the browser and caches it naturally. It doesn't cache any of the data or what have you, so we have to do that separately and run a synchronization, all the rest of it. But the actual applications are more like applications loaded and cached and managed within the browser. So that really gives us some quite significant performance improvement overall. Paul was mentioning the Clarity collaboration. That's really come about because of we've sort of been dealing with a lot of large number of regional councils particularly on the fleet side, and often the sort of water, a lot of particularly New South Wales, of course, and Queensland, where it's one, the councils run all the water like Bundaberg does. There's been a lot of interest in what we're doing with water. But the likes of the sort of Greater Western and Barwon and, what have you are kind of almost overkill. We're talking to a very small council this week, and it's kind of like, 2 plumbers and, his apprentice, and that was running the entire local water. But as a result, a lot of the guys just don't have any form of asset management, no form of works management, and yet they're still dealing with tens of millions of dollars worth of plant and equipment, whether it be sewage treatment or water treatment or what have you, and it's just really tough for them to sort of have systems that actually work. So what we're trying to put together is a real cut down version of what we're doing with the water guys are in the room here, and sort of have a meeting of mind in terms of where that balance is between the kind of off the shelf and yet let them say build their own their own actions and things like that around that. It won't have the depth, or we won't be looking at the depth that the like of Greater Western and Barwon in terms of network tracing and all that sort of. They don't have that sort of ESC reporting requirements in any event. So it'll be interesting, but we sort of put a little message out, and we're actually almost overwhelmed with the number of local councils that we're able to quickly pull in a week's time. They were very enthusiastic, so it'll be interesting what we can do. Sean from Bundaberg is going to help lead it because a couple of his neighbours are actually interested in sort of forming part of that consortium, and they run a local area, information sharing and whatever you'd like to sort of council of water utilities in some of those regions. So anyway, we'll report on that. We'll report on its success or failure. We might get everyone in the room and no one can agree on anything, so it'll die a very quick death, or everyone will get together and have a few good ideas. I suspect that the actual response was so positive, and knowing we've spoken to so many of them, they'll actually be keen to actually try and move something forward, because they're actually really crying out for something. They just, at best, they've got spreadsheets. At worst, it's still a lot of paper. So that's going to happen, and we'll hopefully get them involved, perhaps in a future meetup. So that's really
report back. Yeah.
That. Is there anything else, Paul, you could think of that we need?
Oh, that's about it. I'm good news.
I suppose just on the technology on the version 4. So just as an update on that. Greater Western have been in UAT for the last week. Is that right, Lachie? I think it's last week that we started.
Yeah, last 2 weeks. So
last 2 weeks.
Last round of UAT will be the next couple of days. The last fixes have been put in, and we'll sign them off ready for deployment next week.
Yeah. So the aim's to deploy next week. Version 4, and I think I've probably mentioned it before, is quite significant. It's almost every single line of code. It's a complete technology change. It's not just so it's a sort of a complete jump to the next line of technology. We actually spend a lot of time refactoring some of Greater Western Water's code and that in moving across as well, just to get their own application performing better. And it incorporates also about 6 months worth of new features too, doesn't it, Lachie? I think it's got all your safety and
there's a bit of new stuff going in, but it definitely allows us to implement a lot of the things that we've really been pushing for. So it'll allow us to go more with the live stuff, the offline capability as well.
Yeah.
But really what we've been working on is the like for like, but also the improvement in speed and capability. So we've really noticed, especially in the map rendering, whereas previously you might have to wait 20-30 seconds for an entire case or action to load up because the map's rendering in the background. Now, as soon as data becomes available, it's visible, and the background rendering is still continuing. So it's a significant performance improvement's been seen.
Yeah. The way it functions, it's sort of a high perception value too, because it renders what it has at any one point in time. Therefore, the user is actually seeing data as it's sort of arriving, rather than waiting until the last process and then presenting it. So that gives it both, and it's also, there's a real performance improvement in terms of the overall load time is much better, yet as well as the perceived. So the perceived is almost instantaneous, and the final load is still faster as well. So that's made a big difference.
And definitely noticeable for the guys in the field as well. Like, it's all well and good when we're sitting in head office and we've got T1 connections and it's all working smoothly, but when you're out the back of Burke and you've got 1 bar on 3G, a lot of these guys have really noticed that kind of thing. So that's where the impact will really be seen with the boots on the ground.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think we're going to have, we'll get Grant to kick off on his discussion. It might be a relatively short meeting today because we're really, it's not going to be a long prezzo on it, but just a quick discussion. I think between Lachie and Grant, they'll talk it through. So I'll hand it over.
Okay, Grant, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Or do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit first. So, yeah, so here I am presenting from the Nerve Centre of Formbird in Cheltenham. We've been talking about this for some time with Greater Western Water. At the moment, they have a process for doing asset protection and getting the feedback from all the different utilities through dial before you dig, which is highly manual. The user has to, or the dispatcher has to go into the dial before you dig system and load up an inquiry, send it off, and then they wait for the responses to come back from all the individual utilities, take the emails, take the files out of the emails with the information of the responses that have been sent, upload them into the case, and then once all the responses have been received, they can then let the crew know that it's safe to proceed with work and that the information's available. Obviously, there's a couple of downsides to that. One is that there's inevitably going to be a delay from when the information's available until when the crew has it available to them. So we can eliminate that loss in time. And then there's also just the work involved in manually handling all that process. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that current state, Lachie, or?
Yeah, so realistically what we found was the guys in the field don't obviously apply for their own dials. So the field worker would see that they need to commence an excavation or start doing a drill. They'd reach out to the dispatcher, hoping that the dispatcher's free and they're not getting smashed by other things. Like Grant said, they'd go on to dial before the dig website, make sure that all the information's transposed out of the case into the application and issued out. Where we were seeing a real delay was the response comes in email. Now, if the dispatcher is getting smashed by an incident that's happening at the time or someone's on a break, checking of the email was always secondary to answering the phone. So we were seeing sometimes, 30 minutes plus where an email had actually been received, but works on the ground couldn't commence. The other benefit that we're hoping to achieve with this one is we've been working pretty closely with PelicanCorp, and they hadn't really considered the possibility that you might want to see individual dials before all dials are available. So what we've proposed with them is rather than waiting till, you might be waiting for 5 or 6 dials to come back before it's submitted back to the applicant, what we're suggesting is that we're able to jump into their API and they make it available that individual dials have become available, and then we'll receive a final notification when all dials have become available. And what that means for us is if we're digging in an area and, gas and oil is the first one to respond, if we can see that there's gas and oil there straight away, then we can order a hydro, we can start using NDT or arranging NDT methods while we wait for the rest of the dials to come back in. What's happening at the moment is because we're waiting for all of them, it may be an additional half an hour or an hour before all the rest of them say they're fine, but that gas and oil that could have been available an hour ago came back and said, yes, you actually need to do an NDT here. So we're really looking to leverage that capability and get to a point where we may actually be able to hit the API from within the application so that we can say request dials, and that's done automatically rather than tying up dispatches and having to do a manual process to hit their website where there's a potential for transposition errors, that type of thing. So we have a lot of the information that the API is looking for already in our cases or actions, and it would be as simple as requesting a dial or making a dial before you dig application from within the application itself.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so as Lachie mentioned, and I flashed up halfway through his talking there, and now I can't find it again. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I'll just share this. So, yes, so we're sort of basically taking the opportunity here that, as Lachie mentioned, that working with PelicanCorp, that they have an API that we're able to hit in order to submit the dial before you dig. And that API was already in existence. This is this so-called one call access API. And then we've worked with them, and they've now developed an API, a webhook system that we can tap into to actually monitor for when the responses are received from the individual utilities. So this is a slightly complicated little diagram, but hopefully you can see that well. Can I get some feedback on that? Is it clear enough?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So yeah. So this is the Formbird system, and over here we have the one call API, which will submit the inquiries off to the different utilities. We have the utilities here, and then we have this new API that Pelican have developed with some feedback from us for monitoring those responses, and then we can access those responses as they come in. So our concept here is that we'd have something on the case for submitting a dial before you dig. It'll create a new document, which is we're calling it a permit to work. So we'll be obtaining a dial before you dig. And that'll essentially take the details directly from the case. That new document will open up, and there's a few mandatory details that need to be added in order for dial before you dig to give you the correct information. I'll show you that in a minute. We submit the details into the API, they go off to the utility, and as the responses come back in, we'll get a notification, and sorry, I should have said, when we first hit this API, we'll get a response that will tell us which utilities have been contacted, and we'll create a response document for each of the utilities that are expected to respond. And then as they respond, we'll fill in the details, attach their documentation, and update this permit to state how many of the respondents have responded. 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5 have responded, and summarise the details of each of the responses on this one document here. And also we'll be uploading the files to our file server so that you can access them directly from within the Formbird CLARITY application. So just to, and this is still in development, so the templates that I'm showing you are just our initial design, and we haven't built any of the automation in behind them, but it gives you an idea of how it'll look to a user. So just as we do today, where we add different types of actions, you'll be able to add and obtain dial before you dig action. It will default some of the details through. There'll be a map here where we can indicate the area that we're interested in. Something like this. Oops. Click. Boom. Okay, we're interested in that area. There'll be some additional tools that we're going to have in there, circles with radii and so on. Some of the mandatory information will be available, will need to be filled in here. And then once you save it, it will prompt you, do you actually want to submit a dial before you dig? And it'll submit, and then it'll start monitoring and updating this document as we get responses. You'll see the responses summarised here. And also, depending on what sort of rules we develop with Greater Western, we may choose to send out SMS or email messages to particular users as those responses come in, or once all the complete responses are received. So that's how the dial before you dig document would look. We'll also have a singular response document that for each of the utilities that will contain the links to the actual files. I'm also proposing to have a summary of all the files in this obtain dial before you dig document. And then, yeah, just one last little thing. You'll also receive an email separately. So that's kind of like I guess the fail-safe. If there's any kind of issue with receiving something here, you'll still receive the emails that you currently receive out of that system with a summarized sort of zip file. So that's that's the sort of rough overview of what we're working on. It's coming along quite well. I expect we'll have something probably in the next month or so that we can demonstrate with the automation working behind it. But be interested if anyone's got any comments about how they might envisage using that kind of thing in their systems or any other feedback.
Might just quickly jump in. Well, the one thing that I know our primary contractor is really looking forward to leveraging is just having the ability to have a dashboard that displays jobs that are pending dials and what status they're in. Because at the moment we may have, up to a dozen jobs at a time that are all pending dial before you dig responses. If you do have the ability to dashboard those, you can say, here's the 10 cases that are being looked at. Red would indicate no responses, orange may indicate some responses, green would indicate all responses. And from being able to do that within the application, rather than checking emails and saying, oh, I've got that now, I'll check it over here, you can literally click from the dash, it'll take you to that job, and then the dispatcher or the scheduler, whoever's planning those works, will be able to go straight in knowing that the responses are there and allocate those works out.
Yeah, so with the sort of responses that we're getting from the API from Pelican, we'll get a count of the total number of responses that we're expecting and the number that have been received, and we'll be maintaining that in here. And so it'll be, and also once this is completed, this status is completed, we'll update it to completed. So it will be straightforward to have a listing of all pending dial before you digs and all recently completed dial before you digs. So it's certainly something we can add in.
Thanks, guys. So Lachie, how many dial before you digs do you do at the moment? How many do you guys do?
I'd be guessing, but it's probably, it'd be over 10 a day.
Right.
So it's a significant portion of the day where they may be minor and we might not need them for 3 or 4 days because it's a planned job. But in the mix there is also, the burst in a major road that we can't do anything but traffic control until we know what's going on. So it is a big part of the dispatcher's day or the planner's day. And this will just really allow us to take that manual part and the prioritisation piece out of it.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. Now, I just suddenly dawned on me that in my conversation about this group that's coming together next week, anyone and everyone is invited. And, part of the concept is also to not just be for the smaller guys, but any of the bigger guys who want, that we can modularize items and build that out. It's kind of like a bit of a shared pool of resourcing of building functions. So don't assume that it's just really, we're targeting purely the smallest guys. Part of the concept is just trying to get a real understanding of what the broad brush issues are that people are dealing with, and it's good. Feel free to come along. Just send an email to Ian or myself. All right. Is there anyone out there, I suppose, that would either like to talk about dial before you dig, or any other items that you'd like to, talk about? Could be very quiet. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up nice and early then. If it's going to be it'll be a quick one. Paul, did you have anything or?
No, just to I wouldn't mind just a little bit of housekeeping. If I could have maybe how did people get their invites? I'd love to know. We're still trying to perfect it. And there's a fine line between sending out 1 million invites via this way or that way. So Who got the colourful email? Anybody?
Get people to stick it in the chat, Paul, maybe.
Oh, you stick it in the chat. Yeah, if you got colourful email, or did you get the more traditional Zoom type invite?
I'll remember.
Oh, well, you're here. Yeah. Well, the Zoom, it's easy to remember. The Zoom invite that has the little yes, no, I think, and the whereas a colourful one doesn't. All right. So that look, that's it looks like it's sort of coming in Zoom mostly, which
Zoom
is
mostly, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
You know, I'm wasting my time with all the colourful things.
Yeah.
But everyone knows that. Everyone knows. So the other thing would be the next meetup. So we have that booked in for. If you excuse me for 1 second. That's at the bottom of the thing. Number 4 will be in August, which is a fair way away. It's so far away. August the 18th. So you'll get an email. It will be colourful, and that colourful email will contain a link to the recording, and you can share that, watch it, ignore it. We always include a index at the bottom, so you can, or time-stamped index, so you can jump forward to anything that was important, and we'll see everybody.
And look, also the other point there is if there's any specific topic you'd like us to be covering that we know, in terms of what we're doing or what have you, please send it through. Agenda points are great. Even if you want to look at specific processes or how we handle something or something you're trying to deal with and want to discuss as a group, we've got great resources like, Lachie here, Ming's here. There's a whole lot of guys here that have had a whole, many, many years experience in implementing, this sort of work asset management, field work stuff for as long as, since God was a boy. So yeah, feel free to leverage them. I'm sure they won't mind. They're always very generous with their time and effort. So yeah.
Mark, it might be topics like integration with GPS, for instance. Would there be any value, or where is the value to you guys, for instance?
It could be. Okay, guys. Well, thanks again. And the video will be up in a couple of days, and we'll stay in touch. And thanks for coming along.